You know melanin, right? It's the stuff that gives us the color of our skin, our hair, our eyes. But what happens when that exact same pigment starts showing up in places it has no business being, like your lungs or your aorta? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into today. So here's the game plan. We'll start with how our body makes this natural paint in the first place. Then we'll dive into what happens when that process gets a little weird, which leads to something called melanosis. We'll look at the whole spectrum, from too much pigment to too little. Check out the tools scientists use to spot it, and then, this is the fun part, we'll uncover a fascinating case of mistaken identity. All right, first things first, let's talk about the star of our show, melanin. It's so much more than just color. It's actually a pretty incredible protector. Okay, so think of melanin as your body's own custom-made, super powerful sunscreen. Seriously, its #1 job isn't just cosmetic, it's to create this tiny protective shield right over the nucleus of our cells. It's basically a microscopic bodyguard, standing guard, protecting our DNA from the sun's damaging UV rays. It's a huge job for something so small. The way our body makes melanin is like a perfectly organized little factory. It all starts in these special cells called melanocytes. That's our factory floor. They use a special enzyme, tyrosinase, to kickstart the recipe. The finished melanin gets packed up into these little containers called melanosomes, which then get delivered to our skin cells, all ready to do their job. It's an amazing, efficient little system. But what happens when that production line has a hiccup? When the factory doesn't get the memo to shut down, or starts shipping its product to completely the wrong address? Well, that's where we get to the heart of our topic today, melanosis.
So what is melanosis exactly? Put simply, it's when you get a buildup of melanin in places where it just shouldn't be. We're not talking about skin or hair anymore. We're talking deep inside the body, and the source material points specifically to organs like the lungs and even the aorta, which is the body's biggest artery.
Now, I want you to pay close attention to this because it's a direct quote from our source material, and it's really, really important. Melanin itself is not harmful. The pigment isn't some toxic substance. The problem isn't the pigment itself, but the fact that it's showing up in the wrong place. It's a signal, a biological flag that something else might be going on. So what would a doctor or scientist actually see? Well, with the naked eye, an organ might just look like it has dark brown or black spots on it. But if you were to touch it, the texture would be completely normal. The real story, as always, is under the microscope. There, you'd find the body's cleanup crew, these immune cells called macrophage, just stuffed full of melanin. They call these little guys melanophores, and sometimes they are so packed with dark pigment that you can barely even see the rest of the cell. Sometimes the best way to understand what too much of something means is to look at its complete opposite. So to really get a grip on melanosis, let's see what happens when there's too little pigment. It's really all about balance. On one side, you have melanosis, which is this abnormal increase and misplacement of melanin, and on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got conditions like albinism and leukoderma, which are all about a partial or even total absence of that same pigment.
And there are two main ways this absence shows up. Albinism is something you're born with, and it's widespread across the whole body. It happens because that key enzyme for making melanin, tyrosinase, is missing from the get-go. Then you have leukoderma, which is something that happens later in life. It's usually localized to just a few spots and can be triggered by things like skin injuries, think burns or scars.
Okay, so imagine you're a pathologist and you see some dark pigment in a tissue sample. How do you know for sure it's melanin? And how can you tell exactly what's going on with the cells? Well, this is where the real detective work begins. This is a really important difference. You've got two key players, melanoblast and melanophores. Think of the melanoblasts as the producers. They're the factory cells actually making the melanin. The melanophores, on the other hand, are just the carriers. They're immune cells that have basically just gobbled up the pigment and are now holding on to it. In melanosis, what scientists find are the carriers, not the producers. So to tell these two apart, scientists have some pretty cool tools in their toolkit. There's something called the DOPA reaction. It's a test that only turns positive for the producer cells, the melanoblasts. That's how they separate them from the carriers. Then, they can use something called a Fontana stain, which is like a special highlighter that turns all the melanin granules jet black, making them super easy to see under a microscope. All right, now for my favorite part, the plot twist. Sometimes something can look exactly like melanosis, but it's an imposter. A convincing one, too, that shows up after the fact. It's called pseudomelanosis, which literally means false melanosis. And here's the kicker, the one detail that changes everything. This dark color only appears after death. It's not a condition a person has while they're alive, it's just a natural chemical change that happens as part of decomposition.
This table just lays it all out perfectly. True melanosis happens during life, and its source is melanin. The imposter, pseudomelanosis, only happens after death, and the dark color? It's not melanin at all. It's actually iron sulfide, which is created by a chemical reaction between iron from old blood cells and gases produced by bacteria. It just happens to be black. Same color, but a completely different story.
So, what's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, it's that our body's system for color is an incredibly delicate balancing act. And anytime that balance is off, whether it's too much pigment, too little, or pigment popping up in weird places, it's a signal. It's our body's way of sending us a message.
And that kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If something as simple as the placement of pigment can tell such a complex story, what other silent signals are our bodies sending us every single day? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.